Hello everyone.
And welcome to Dad
And me
Love History.
Dad and me love a whole lot of history. We could be the greatest team that the world has ever seen. Dad and me love a whole lot of history.
In 2017, when we were on a trip to England, we decided to investigate a very special Tudor princess, and that's today's episode.
Why was Princess Elizabeth the girl who should never be queen? So this takes us back almost 500 years to Tudor England, to the time of Henry VIII and more importantly, his 3 children.
We love history. We love history, baby. We love history.
So 2017, that was a year before we launched Dad and Me, but we did make some recordings when we were in England.
We were younger historians then, and we were on the trail of the young Princess Elizabeth, the girl who should never become a queen.
At least that's what lots of people believed, including her own half-sister, Mary, and Mary was queen, and she was married to the most powerful man in the world, and he didn't like Elizabeth either.
He was Philip II of Spain, and his empire stretched all around the world.
Yeah, from the country named after him in Asia. I'll just give you a few seconds in case anyone can get that one, might be one for parents. Name a country in Asia named after Philip II of Spain.
Philippines.
That's right, the Philippines. From there, right over to Argentina and through Mexico, lots of places in between, and right up to and including California, Texas, and Florida. Just think of those Spanish names like San Francisco and Los Angeles. They were all controlled by Spain. Spain was the superpower, and England was not very strong. And nobody spoke English outside of Britain and Ireland because there was no English or British Empire yet. So it was a different world when Elizabeth was growing up.
But what caused such a big divide between Elizabeth and Mary?
Religion. Although Catholics and Protestants were all part of Christianity, it became known that if you had different religious views to the king or queen back then, even a little bit different, you could expect to die fast. So, we said Elizabeth and Mary were half-sisters. They had different mothers, but the same father, who was...
Henry VIII.
That's right. So Henry VIII had Catholic religious views through most of his life, until the end of his 24-year marriage to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Henry and Catherine had a daughter, Mary. Catherine was from Spain. Mary was brought up to believe that the Catholic ways were the right ways to do things, and everything else was just evil. Anyway, back to Henry. After Mary had grown up, because Henry didn't like the Catholic Church's rules that would not let him divorce Catherine of Aragon, he started up his own type of churches, Protestant churches, or called the Church of England in England. Guess who Henry made head of the Church of England?
Himself?
Oh yeah, that's right. He had this little conversation with himself. Henry? Yes, Henry. In 24 years of marriage, Catherine has only given me a daughter, Mary, and I want sons, because only males can be strong rulers, everybody knows that. So Henry, my old friend, will the boss of your new Church of England allow me to divorce Catherine and marry that young Anne Boleyn? Well, Henry, I'll just ask myself, Henry, as head of the Church of England, will you let me, Henry, get divorced? Yes, of course I will, Henry. Hey, Henry, good news! I say yes, I can get divorced. Oh, thank you, Henry. You're the best religious leader we've ever had. The Church of England had different rules about how to do everything, and if English Catholics didn't agree, Henry would give them the... And when Anne Boleyn had a daughter, Elizabeth, so this is Henry's second wife now, she was brought up to believe the Church of England ways were correct and Catholic ways were wrong. So, Henry got fed up with Anne Boleyn, as you'll hear in a moment, and Mary, who would become queen. Mary would look at how Henry had got rid of Anne Boleyn, and Mary started thinking that Elizabeth should get the same punishment.
King Arthur's Round Table?
I don't know. Who did make King Arthur's Round Table?
Circumference.
Shall we go into the Tower of London now, James?
Yay!
We're on the River Thames, right next to the Tower of London, and just along the river wall. And that was the tunnel entrance that would take you through, under where people are walking, to that gate entrance to the Tower of London, and that was called Traitor's Gate. And many a person was taken into Traitor's Gate, and they would not come out of the tower alive. Well, there was someone who was taken in, a Princess Elizabeth, and her half-sister Mary had Elizabeth taken up the river. All of them Tudor royal palaces were at different places down the River Thames, or at least many of them were. Whitehall was the centre of power. And so from there, the main method of transportation would be by boat. So that's where they were brought up the river by boat, and prisoners were taken in through Traitor's Gate, the water tunnel entrance into the Tower of London. So now we're stood over the tunnel entrance to Traitor's Gate with the water down below us. Oh, can you see what's in the water? What are people thrown in?
Money.
Yeah, lots of coins. 2 pence, 10 pence, maybe some bigger ones. So here in Traitor's Gate, I don't think they ever used to throw money down there in Tudor times or medieval times. But Princess Elizabeth was brought in through this entrance, but so was her mother years earlier. 20 years earlier, her mother, Anne Boleyn, was brought in through the same entrance. And Anne Boleyn was brought in, taken out of the boat, up the steps, taken to her rooms, and then some days later...
When is a piece of wood like a king?
I don't know. When is a piece of wood like a king?
When it's a ruler.
We'll pick up the story in a minute at Hatfield House, the country palace where Elizabeth spent most of the first 25 years of her life, which was how long she was a princess for. Elizabeth didn't live in the same palace as Henry, neither did Mary. Henry never wanted either of his daughters to be monarch, that means king or queen, so he didn't spend time with them or train them up to be rulers. In fact, one bit we kind of missed out at there. Henry's third wife, Jane Seymour, after Anne Boleyn, did have a son called Edward, and males went straight to the front of the queue to be the next monarch. So it didn't matter that Edward was so young. In fact, when Henry died, Edward was only 9 years old, and he became king ahead of his grown-up sister Mary and his Elizabeth. So Henry died assuming that Edward would have children, boys preferably, and obviously Elizabeth would never be queen, because it would be Edward's kids and then their kids. Even if Edward didn't have children, it would be his sister Mary, and then it would be her kids who would be the next rulers. Not Elizabeth, right?
Well, it didn't quite work out as Henry wanted to, as we'll see.
At Hatfield House, where we recorded our next clip, we found some great sources of evidence that told us a lot about the history of Elizabeth. We read letters and other documents that were written by Elizabeth, and we saw how portraits, paintings that were made at the time of her life tell us so much.
But a painting of a king or a queen can show us what they want people to see.
That's right, and in this next clip you'll hear how Elizabeth was clever at using paintings to show her as powerful and strong, even superhuman. But how did she get to be a superhuman queen? How did Princess Elizabeth go from being a prisoner awaiting execution to England's most powerful queen?
We investigated.
So now we are in the grounds of Hatfield House. It was Princess Elizabeth's home. Now she, of course, was never meant to be queen. Henry VIII, her father, wanted a son. Only a son could be king. And he had Edward, his son, younger than Elizabeth, became king. He was expected to get married, have children, but he died. Do you remember how old Edward was when he died, James?
15.
That's right, he died of tuberculosis when he was 15. So then their half-sister Mary became queen. She was married to Philip II of Spain. Many people considered Spain the main enemy of England. But yeah, Mary became queen. And then her children, she had them, would become the next king and queen. So Elizabeth was never meant to be queen. Mary thought Elizabeth was plotting against her. And Mary had Elizabeth arrested and taken by boat along the River Thames into Traitor's Gate, into the Tower of London. If you entered Traitor's Gate in the Tower of London, that was usually for one reason only. What would happen to your head, James?
It was gonna be off.
And so Elizabeth was imprisoned in the Tower of London, looking out the window over the spot of the execution block, the wooden block where her mother, Anne Boleyn, had rested her head and had it chopped off one day. And Elizabeth was there wondering, is it my day today? Is it today that I'm going to get my head chopped off? But Mary, she wanted to find evidence of Elizabeth plotting against her. And when she couldn't find any evidence, eventually she sent Elizabeth back here to Hatfield House, under arrest at this lovely old palace. Mary's guards all around, and then one day Elizabeth was sat under an oak tree in the grounds just where we are now, and a messenger came galloping up to her on horseback, and he delivered the news, and quite possibly the sovereign's ring as well, the ring that's put on a cushion, presented to Elizabeth. Only the king or queen can wear that ring. Henry had worn it, Edward had worn it, Mary had worn it, and now it was being presented to Elizabeth. Last time she'd seen Mary, Mary had a growing stomach and thought she was pregnant. She was going to have a child who would be the next king or queen. That growth, which was probably cancer, turned out to kill Mary. There was no baby. And so Mary died, and Elizabeth puts on the sovereign's ring. And the messenger announced to Elizabeth, "The queen is dead! Long live the queen!" And of course, one queen, Mary, had died, and a princess had that moment become queen herself. And Elizabeth responded by saying, "This is the Lord's doing. This is God's doing. And it is wonderful in our eyes."
What do people say if a knight in shining armor gets killed?
I don't know, what do people say if a knight in shining armour gets killed?
Rust in peace.
So, Elizabeth became queen.
But her troubles were just beginning.
Yeah, Mary was dead, but her husband Philip was still king of Spain. He was the most powerful man in the world, and he was a Catholic extremist. You either do everything our way or you're dead. Anyway, Philip really wanted to control England again, as he did as Mary's husband when she was alive. So soon after Mary died, he asked Elizabeth to marry him.
What did she say?
Elizabeth didn't answer him. Meanwhile, the English people were divided. Millions followed Elizabeth's Church of England ways, but millions of others still followed the Catholic ways, Philip's Catholic ways. Some of the leading English Catholics, rich noblemen, some of them were extremists themselves, and they were willing to kill Elizabeth if she wouldn't marry Philip and become Catholic. And they secretly told Philip this.
When we were at Hatfield House, we got to see some of the original secret code letters the plotters sent to each other.
Yeah, they called them ciphers. Elizabeth's spies discovered these secret messages, read them, decoded them, so worked out what all the jumbled up letters actually really meant, and then of course caught the plotters.
So we're now going to go investigate inside Hatfield House, and I'm hoping that we are going to see the most famous portrait of Elizabeth I, which was painted 400 years ago when Elizabeth I was queen. So Elizabeth was never meant to be queen. In fact, her father made her live in a separate palace from him and virtually never saw her She never saw her even when she was a little girl, even when she was your age. How old are you, James?
8.
It's fancy that. Never seen your father. He'd like that, really, wouldn't you? He's nodding his head. But she was smart, and she learned 6 languages. Welsh, because the Tudor family originally came from Wales. English, French, Spanish, Latin, and Greek. And when I say she learned those languages, I mean for presents. Well, particularly when she was younger, she would give Edward or Mary, and she would give them a present. She would copy somebody else's book, and she would copy the entire book. And she wouldn't just copy it from English to English, she would copy it from ancient Greek into Latin, the whole book. So we had these perfect, beautifully written books. So when Elizabeth eventually did become queen, she of course could speak all these languages. So when she was dealing with the kings of France and Spain, she could speak to them in their own language. She could charm them, and she would charm them, and she would also understand everything that was said. She wasn't going to be put down by them being men, and this being 400 years ago, and men acting like they're superior to women. She would show that she was every bit as clever, if not more so.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Queen.
Queen who?
Queen, your room. It's filthy.
My room's filthy. What about yours?
I'll see you shortly.
So here we go in a Victorian lift, obviously added a few hundred years after Elizabeth I. They nicknamed it the King James room. What do you think about that, James?
Funny.
Would you like this as your room?
Yes.
Not very big though.
Yeah.
What you found, James? Whoa.
Famous one.
That is the famous one. Do you know what it's called? It's called the Rainbow Portrait. Yeah, we can clearly see a rainbow shape in Elizabeth's right hand. So she's holding the rainbow. Above it is written in Latin, non sine sole iris, no rainbow without the sun. So she's kind of saying, I'm the sun. Have a look at what she's wearing. So it's big, kind of puffy shoulders. And she was really small, really skinny. But she wanted to make herself look powerful. So don't forget, she's not supposed to be queen. She's got lots of enemies in England who support Mary still, even after Mary died, and support her husband, Philip II of Spain, the most powerful man in the world. Lots of people plotting to get rid of Elizabeth. So every portrait that she had made was to make her look big, strong, powerful. You can see the big collar, the jewels, but also you see the kind of the things sticking out from her shoulder. It's kind of shape of angel wings. It's kind of saying, I'm a goddess. Come closer, James, and there's some really interesting details here. Can you see what's on the inside of her cloak?
Yes.
What?
An eye, an ear.
That's right, there are eyes and ears all over her cloak. Now that symbolises she's saying, I can see and hear everything. I'm the queen and I know everything. I see everything, I hear everything. She's wearing the pearls for purity.
So what happened with Philip asking her to marry him?
Then she said she'd think about it. He asked several times, you see. People assumed a woman couldn't rule on her own, so people thought Elizabeth couldn't be a strong leader and could never be safe, and maybe her country could never be safe unless she married. At least that's what they thought at first.
So what about Philip?
On his last proposal to her, she sent a reply to Spain, but it wasn't a nice letter saying, oh, thanks, but no thanks. It was actually a box of cannonballs. That's how she answered his marriage proposal. As you can imagine, he didn't like that. She didn't marry Philip. She said, I am married to England. And so he tried to invade England. But by then, Elizabeth had become a lot stronger. She was like a goddess to her people. She'd been queen for about 30 years by now. And they all saw portraits of her when they went to church on Sundays. There's no TV, no internet, but they saw her image every week. Everyone was expected to go to church. And they'd see portraits at church, or including on the front of their Bibles. And she looked in these pictures so strong and powerful and like a goddess with angel wings. So people inspired by her fought to defend England against Spain. But even more useful was a really bad storm that wrecked a load of Spanish ships. After that, Philip's troops went home, and because of that storm, everyone thought God had chosen Elizabeth's side. So it was supposed to be the best weather, best time of year for the weather, and then the world's worst storm, or certainly the worst one that anyone in England had ever seen, came along and wrecked most of the Spanish ships onto the rocks. And everyone thought, wow, yeah, Elizabeth's like the chosen one. Maybe she is a goddess. And once she had defeated Spain, England started being stronger. She decided to send some English ships over to America, which was largely controlled by Spain, North and South and Central America. And she sent people to America, English people, to live there. And she sent some other ships to India. And so that's why today English is widely spoken in North America, in a lot of North America, and in India. She started what would become the British Empire.
So Princess Elizabeth really did go from being a prisoner in the Tower of London to England's most powerful queen.
Yep, she sure did. She was quite a girl.
We love history. We love history, baby. We love history. And now we go to an advert break for parents.
The Slightest Chance is my latest World War II thriller love story based around real history. After the Japanese won the Battle of Hong Kong, a young English woman named Gwen, who was a real person, was the only female to escape from a Japanese camp, and she did so on foot, and then faced an 800-mile journey across occupied China. By the end of this novel, you will have learned all about her extraordinary adventure and how Gwen was secretly carrying information which the very top of the British government would use in the fight against Imperial Japan. Also from real history, included in the novel is the mass breakout led by a one-legged Chinese admiral, and then there's the Japanese guard, Kiyoshi Watanabe, whose Christian faith pushed him to risk his life helping Japan's enemies. Find out more at poorletters.com. The Slightest Chance, when your enemy is your best friend.
Here are 6 questions to see how well you were listening.
Number 1. Henry ended up as Church of England, but what type of religion did he follow first?
Number 2. Which gate was Elizabeth brought in through when she was taken to the Tower of London?
Number 3. Why do you think Mary did not want Elizabeth to be queen?
Number 4. Give 2 examples of sources of evidence that we found at Hatfield House.
Number 5. Why did people think a woman could not rule on her own?
And finally, number 6. How did Elizabeth show that she was a clever and strong leader? What was it about her personality, or what did she do? Well, that's about it from Dad and me.
Hey people, have you told your friends about this great podcast series yet? Share!
Yeah, and please review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to us, or tell us what you think.
On Facebook.
And Instagram.
And Twitter. Bye from now.
From Dad.
And me.
Love history.
Dad and me love a whole lot of history. We could be the greatest team that the world has ever seen. Dad and me love a whole lot of history.
Oh yeah, well, I haven't actually got the intro bit here. Do I need to do that? Or do we say hello everyone and welcome to...
Dad and we love history, and today we'll be talking about...
Okay. So who does the hello everyone?
You do hello everyone, and then I say welcome to, and then you say Dad, and then I say me, and then we both say love history.
Hello everyone.
And welcome to...
Dad and... It's funny to read down. La 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 la. You want a sound check?
No.
Alright then, let's go. Henry would give them the proper sound effect.
Off with your head.
What do people say if a knight in shining armour gets killed?
I don't know. What do people say if a knight in training? Oh, chain.
Shining armour.
Oh, sorry. I don't know. What do people say if a knight in shining armour gets killed?
Rust in peace.
Rust in peace. Do you know the name of the fattest king? No. Do you know the name of the fattest knight at Henry VIII's court?
No.
Circumference.
What? I don't get that one.
Well, he's like big and fat and round, and circumference goes round a circle, is the outside of a circle.
Yeah, true.
Tough crowd. Got one more. Both of which overlap with yours, Jake, so you won't like this one either. Once there was a king, only 12 inches tall. That's 30 centimetres, people. He was a lousy king, but he made a great ruler. Hi, caramba.
Bye from now.
Okay, sorry.
Bye from now.
From Dad,
And me.
Love History.